Italian Grand Prix Mugello. Hello Carletto. Guys, I know you were expecting to see the good Pernat with Prosecco as always, but Carletto is making a pit stop, so Paolo and I decided to unworthily replace him on this occasion.
But in a really good and desirable location, of course.
Yes.
So we thought that with this heat, and especially after the heat at Mugello and Misano, I needed a bit of refreshment, obviously along with a good glass of Prosecco.
You might think we're in Rome, but actually we're in Monte Carlo, a park of the highest level. Then after Paolo, we have a bit of company because they saw the Prosecco bottles and asked if they could join. Anyway, enough chat. Paolino, the good Carlo Pernat is talking about MotoGP.
He talks about MotoGP. We talk about MotoGP, about this Mugello where Marquez started off defensively, let's say, saying he would do what he could, but in reality, he dominated both the sprint and the Grand Prix. I don't agree with those who say the Grand Prix was boring because the first laps really were worth the price of admission. Gigi Dall'Igna himself almost had a heart attack, same for Claudio Domenicali and the whole team. The opening laps were fantastic with this constant exchange of positions between Bagnaia, Alex and Marc Marquez. Then Marc pulled ahead a bit and Alex managed to get between the two of them. In my opinion, he absolutely didn't do anything to hold anyone up. By the way, Morbidelli and Pecco said the same thing, that when there's a friendship, or in this case a brotherhood, you don't risk making an overtake just to push your rival off the track. But in the end, Bagnaia dropped back a bit, and eventually Di Gianantonio, who had a fantastic race, also arrived and made it onto the podium, leaving Pecco out. A Ducati domination.
Yes, a Ducati domination that was expected, because it's true that Mugello and Ducati is a combination that's now hard to beat. This time I was surprised by KTM because in my opinion Vinales lost a great opportunity with the contact with Morbidelli. Maybe not to get on the podium, but perhaps finishing fourth ahead of Bagnaia would have been within his reach. But it must be said that in the end Desmosedici remains the benchmark. It's the only bike in the paddock that's consistently at the top on every single track. Then there are some tracks where Aprilia gets in the mix, some tracks where KTM starts to show up, and even Yamaha with Quartararo every now and then. But in reality, there's not much that can be done. Today, Ducati manages to dominate, and the others are just chasing. Claudio Domenicali, by the way, also talked with you about Ducati's intention to think about the future of riders with an academy. So Mugello also gives us this other interesting perspective on the future, right?
Yes, because the Mugello circuit was truly wonderful, and indeed all the races held there were absolutely fantastic. However, unfortunately, the podium positions were practically and almost entirely monopolized by the exceptionally talented Spanish riders. And let's say, as a talent pool for our own country, we are certainly not doing so incredibly well at this particular moment in time. Let's see what Ducati will be able to do, since other key players are kind of letting Italian motorcycling go, and that's something we don't deserve.
Let's talk about Bagnaia, because Bagnaia is the other negative protagonist of the weekend. Before Mugello, Pecco had said, if I were to finish fourth in short, if I don't do well at Mugello, it would be a problem. There was indeed a problem, he confirmed it, and moreover, he also made a very pointed statement afterwards when he talked about how this season is teaching him to really evaluate things and people carefully. In short, these are not exactly messages of peace, in my opinion.
Yes, Pecco is convinced that he doesn't have a winning Ducati in his hands, but first and third place were taken by two GP25S, and in between there was a GP24, assuming for the sake of argument that is currently better set up. In my opinion, as Carlo Pernat says, whose spotlight and place we're kind of stealing, here it's more a matter of making peace with the technical issues, which maybe aren't just imagined but are real, and trying to give 110%. We saw that, in fact, Pecco gave everything he had at Busini, almost lost the front end, but maybe it's a matter of riding position, of many other small details. Also because in this MotoGP, the differences between one top rider and another are just 2/10. But let's add, to quote Michel Piro, that Marc Marquez is still the phenomenon of the last 10 years.
There's not much you can do about it. He's the one who makes a difference greater than the value you mentioned Maybe Pecco has to come to terms with this. Maybe there's a technical issue which in my opinion really worries Pecco a lot, because since the bikes are homologated and the engines too for 2026, this issue needs to be resolved. Otherwise for Pecco it means 2 years in purgatory, thinking he might make it onto the podium a few times at best and win only when someone else has problems. In other words, it means accepting that he can't fight.
Speaking of this, I was really surprised, not so much by Ducati's performance or by what happened, even though after the sprint I figured the Grand Prix would go the same way, but I was negatively surprised by Yamaha and Honda, who at Mugello have once again plummeted to the bottom of the standings.
Yamaha with Quartararo went backwards like a crab, both in the sprint on Saturday and in the race on Sunday. For Fabio, whether it's because of the engine or the M1's grip issues, he just couldn't respond to the attacks from KTM, Aprilia and Ducati. So he really did his best in qualifying, but then in the race he was forced to fall back. Honda, on the other hand, continues to be a bike that is showing real progress on some tracks, while on others it struggles a bit more than expected. Mugello is one of those tracks.
Now there's no break, because this weekend is the Dutch Grand Prix at Assen, and judging by the average Dutch Grand Prix I've seen, it will definitely be held in different weather with a bit of chill in the air. Let's see if climate change has affected Assen as well, although I'm rather doubtful about that. It's another one of the tracks that Pecco Bagnaia really likes, so let's see what we can expect.
In my opinion, a possible surprise at Assen could be Marco Bezzecchi, because it's one of his favorite tracks. Aprilia is strong at Ascendo, you remember Alex Espargaro's amazing comeback. So I think this could be one of those races where Aprilia is definitely one to watch closely. Marco was also strong at Mugello, both in the sprint and in the race. He qualified better than he did at Aragon, so he didn't have to make that incredible comeback, but he still managed to recover up to a certain point and stabilize the gap to the leaders. However, Aprilia needs to make another small step forward in qualifying, because in my opinion, Marco on that bike can be a regular contender for the podium, or at least the top 5. But they need to make this step forward in qualifying, because you can't just wait for the right track to get results. Aprilia needs to make this improvement on every circuit.
Of course, I'd also like to point out, since it's getting warm and we're both dressed in black,
Well, Paolo, neither of us has ever made it onto the MotoGP podium on merit, but let's just say that even if we don't deserve it, we can still enjoy a Prosecco just like the riders did on Sunday. And by the way, it's nice and chilled. Thanks, look at this organization. Scalera made sure to have ice ready for us.
No, it's true, because here, when someone asks, but have you ever raced? Never made it onto the podium.
But we'll toast anyway. Yeah, guys, we'll do it ourselves. Dear Carletto, get well soon, really soon, end of this pit stop. So maybe try to change some of your bad habits so you won't have to go through this again.
And it's not the Prosecco, because I have to say that Claudio. I was thinking about the podium, obviously about Claudio Domenicali last Sunday. Carletto always drinks responsibly, though maybe he should smoke a little less. Oh, happy birthday, Carletto.
Happy birthday, Carlo.